A bizarre incident occurred in the outskirts of an American suburb called Raccoon City. It was later revealed that a terrible disaster had been caused by the T virus, a mutagenic toxin created by the international corporation Umbrella Incorporated. On this episode of Survive the Night podcast, we talk about the 2019 remake of 1998's cult classic, Resident Evil 2. All right, so we're going to be talking about Resident Evil 2, specifically the remake that just came out in 2019 here. I'm Paul, and with me is Sino.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey.
I'm pretty excited to talk about this game. I'll try and avoid just gushing about it, but it's hard not to because I really liked it.
Like, I was cautiously optimistic about it for sure because I'm pretty cynical, especially when it comes to Resident Evil is my favorite series ever, and it has a huge nostalgic value to me, to the point where, you know, those assholes that are gatekeeping elitist bastards on the internet. This is my thing for that. So
yeah, I've seen a couple of those fellows in my time, so I know what you're talking about. But if you're so into something like Resident Evil and how, as a franchise, I'm sure sometimes it is disappointed.
yeah,
You have. I think you're right to have some hesitation to just jumping right in to anything that they do with it.
and for me, it's one of so Resident Evil 2 specifically harkens back to a time when me and my friend just I remember us looking forward to it because we were super into the first one, and the director's cut came with the demo for Resident Evil 2, so we played the shit out of that at his house and just stayed up all weekend and just trying to find little secrets and stuff in it and just play that same 15 minutes over and over. So of course when it came out, we just sat down and played through it multiple times as much as we could. It's one of the more important games in my development as a video game player just in general.
Yeah,
so
I totally get that.
So when a remake was coming out, and even I still feel this way after playing it, I knew Resident Evil 1 remake from 2001, which has been gone through the HD remaster and all that stuff. I knew that would still be more important to me because I'm still more of a fan of that. But this is very, very close in second. So
do you prefer the original remake because of the style of the gameplay, where it's a lot more?
Yeah, I liken it kind of I like Alien more than Aliens, even though I will watch Aliens over Alien because it's funner. This is kind of the same with Resident Evil 2. I've always appreciated the first one more, and I like that style more, but 2 has always just been a fun one to pick up and play because it's kind of short but action-filled. So
yeah, it definitely, the original 2 has a sort of surprising pace to it. It feels very they wanted to make it more actiony or more accessible almost. I always felt the 1998 Resident Evil 2 has a real vibe of, there's less moments where you're just besieged, for instance, by hunters and everything slows down because it gets difficult. And it's much more about just kind of having this rootin' tootin' good time where you get a couple of keys and then you're into a sewer, and it's a much more kind of linear path, I guess, as well.
Yeah, no, for sure. That's it definitely feels like a bigger, more epic thing, but it doesn't have the roots in horror that I like, of just a creepy house where every time you enter a new room, you just stop for a moment and listen to hear what terrible things around the corner that you have to deal with. I don't know, it's just a different feel completely. Or was. This game kind of changed how I view Resident Evil 2 in general, but I'm more curious, what's your history with Resident Evil and the series, and number 2 specifically?
So I would say I have quite a similar actual background as you do, where my favorite Resident Evil of all time, and still now, even after Re-2-make, I guess, is the nomenclature that people have come up with. I
always use it, yeah.
Yeah, because it's easy to say, and if you mix up too much, people are Resident Evil, but the new Resident Evil, the remaked one, the blah blah blah, and people are just what are you on about? Right, Re-2-make. So the original remake, pardon me, is my top 5 game of all time, favorite horror game. I think that they can create a scene with like one dimly lit lampshade in that game that
Totally.
they can like create a better sense of like atmosphere and the scene than like many other games with all the pomp and circumstance that have come even decades afterwards. I think I really enjoy Resident Evil 2 and 3 as well, though I prefer this sort of more tactical, older style of Resident Evil, although I think that them taking the step with Resident Evil 4 was it kept it fresh. You know, like you
Sure.
can't just keep doing the same. I don't want no Dynasty Warriors thing where they're on like Dynasty Warriors 50 and it's the same shit kind of thing, you know?
Yeah.
Um, so I really like I kind of grew up. I was very scared when I was young of Resident Evil. It was the first game I remember being very terrified of
Me too.
because my babysitter's boyfriend played it in front of my sister and we were like, nope, that's it. The thing for us is zombies now. We're not scared of ghosts. We're not scared of vampires or anything like that. Zombies are the thing we're scared of now. And it was because of that game. Because I was born in 1990, so I was very young when these came out.
Mhm.
But a couple of years later, I remember kind of mustering up the courage to play them with my uncle, who was very much like, "Oh, just play all this edgy games with guns and stuff. Don't worry, it's fine." Uh, when I was way too young for it still, but I
Of
remember
course.
getting really kind of into the atmosphere and the idea of like one thing I quite like in games is there was a period in the sort of late 2000s where, and still today, where sometimes up until like maybe Dark Souls, I would say, there was a period of gaming where it felt like it always tried to make you the hero and it always tried to be a power fantasy.
Yeah.
And I like how in Resident Evil, it's just like, hey, you were sloppy and now you're dead because you're not that powerful. And I always think that's the beauty of the series to me. So that's why, 5 and 6, it's the power fantasy again. And then
Yeah.
seven's a weird one, but yeah, so that's kind of my history with the franchise. It's really a franchise that, same as what you said, like my ideas about what I like in games and how I think about gaming is heavily influenced by it,
Mhm.
the series.
Sure. Yeah. Um so that being said, of course, I'm sure you were also a little skeptical about Resident Evil 2 being remade until they kind of kept it under wraps too, which didn't help. Like they kind of by the end there where there was I'm guessing the game was done, they started drip feeding more trailers out and like showing it off to players and stuff like that. But for a while there, they just kind of said we do it and like there's just like a year of like nothing. It's like, oh, well, I hope that it's going well because I haven't heard anything and I'm not necessarily even sure that it's going to come out. But here we are in present day and we have both played through it and both so it sounds like we both think it's phenomenal. Not
Yes.
without maybe very slight nitpicky issues, but they're definitely nothing that takes away from anything, I would say.
There was almost more wild conjecture because there was a base game to platform off of. Like people
Yes.
knew what they were basing it on and how it could develop out of that. You could wildly speculate on. If it was just like, there's a new Resident Evil, people would be like, we don't really know what it's going to be like. But with this, because we know what Resident Evil 2 is like, people were coming up with like I feel like only quite recently people confirmed that yes, there won't be a fixed camera angle mode in the game, that for some reason people decided like, yeah, there's going to be two modes about how you control the camera. It's confirmed, and it's like, confirmed by who?
And
It's
then they
like, oh, my friend on
photoshopped it.
Twitter. Yeah.
Fucking assholes. I hate that shit so much.
Yeah. Just wild ideas that people have where they convince themselves because they want something.
Mhm.
It's an easy trap to fall into, such as with the Smash Bros leaks about what characters are going to be in Smash Bros. Every time people are like, Isaac from Golden Sun confirmed, and I'm like, by who?
Yeah.
Tell me
Yeah.
details, because
And
it sounds to me like you want it to be true, and it ain't.
but then the problem is that the community does, so it spreads like wildfire, and then it almost seems like it is going to be true because so many people are saying, yeah, it's a huge mess. And I have heard from a couple people they're disappointed it doesn't have fixed camera angles. And
Right.
as somebody who loves the originals more than 4, 5, and 6, like with all my heart, um, they're wrong. Like, I'm sorry. There's a point where, like, even though I like that style more, I like tank controls and stuff like that. People bitch about that stuff all the time. The people that are bitching that there's no fixed camera angles would be the people bitching that they are forced if they were in here. Like,
Yeah.
they're wrong. They're absolutely just wrong. The way that game design has gone, we're past that era. And I think what this game does that I was really impressed with is that, like, one of the things that I thought camera angles, fixed camera angles, and tank controls did so well is that they forced kind of I don't know, kind of like a fake tension that wouldn't be there otherwise. And the way they did that is that you would enter a room and then the camera would be like on top of your head basically, and you can't see what's in front of you, but you could hear it. And then it would be a moment of tension before the camera angle would turn. And then the camera angle would turn because you moved a little bit, but then you still don't see it because it's around that corner. And like, it's still building up the tension. What this game does with its sound design is kind of recreate that, even though you can see everything that's coming. And it's actually like phenomenal in a way that made me stop play. I don't usually get scared in games, but this game made me stop a few times and just listen and just be like, shit. Like, I don't know what the hell is up ahead. Or even worse, when it's too quiet, right? When you don't hear anything. That's also terrible.
Because they're cautious to sometimes have moments where it gets very quiet and all of a sudden that is more scary than just kind of some ambience. And I also would argue that it feels still like they've used some of the techniques that you would use for a fixed camera angle Resident Evil.
Sure.
There's moments in the PlayStation where you're looking down the corridor and there's like a flashlight pointed directly at you that reflects off of a puddle of water and also reflects off of like a couple of branches on like a sort of fake potted plant that sways in the wind. And it feels to me like it's not just, oh, they put objects in the world and then you just go and you encounter them. Like, they're creating scenes that they know that you're going to look at it pretty much in the same way most times.
Yeah.
And that's one of the beauties of the original Resident Evil games, is like they basically could film. It was like filming a horror movie because they decide where the camera angle is in the shot. So there's some like bonkers camera angles in the original Resident Evil games where you enter a room and the camera's like outside a window above you, pointing down at you, and it's looking at you through the window. And it sounds crazy on paper, but it like just works.
Yeah.
And I feel like there's still moments in this where obviously you have a lot more movement and you can, like, for me, I'm using my mouse to look around, but there's one zombie in particular on like the upper floors that they put like behind a pillar, and it's really easy to like run and then accidentally get bit by it. And to me, that was part of the moment where I thought, hey, this is a remake of Resident Evil 2. It's not just use the setting. Like, that's the feel of Resident Evil 2, is me not being able to see the zombie because of a camera angle and kind of just like getting cocky and talking to chat while I'm streaming, and then oops, I've been munched.
It's kind of the worst for sure. It's always a jump scare when, like, I don't know. It's weird because it kind of gives you this false sense of security, knowing that you can look wherever, but the game does a very good job of using that against you and kind of forcing your eye to look in specific ways and then doing some things somewhere else. Like, there's a lot of times where there's a hanging corpse or something, you look at it and then like it'll jump scare you by falling a little bit or something, like there's this weird shit where the environment directs your eye and then screws with you when you like look over there, or like when you cross a certain threshold and you hear something behind you, then you look and there's nothing there. Like, it does weird things like the original would have, but it had to be a little more clever about it because you have full control of where you're looking. And I think that's where like their use of the flashlight and dark corridors comes in. I remember specifically a point in Claire's game where there's just like a licker at the end of a hallway on the wall, and you can just barely make it out at the very end of like where your light can reach down the hallway. And it's just enough to just be like, nope, not doing that right now. I'm going to go this way. And yeah, it's crazy how well they are able to recreate that old sense of horror for like a new modernized take. couldn't believe it, frankly.
They really, really pulled it off. In particular, with regards to the sort of difficulty of the gameplay, I feel like, for instance, there's not a lot of melee combat, but they kept the sort of defensive items from Resident Evil Remake.
Yes.
So like you do have one or two options for when a zombie grabs you and it's up close, but you're not. Obviously, they've moved on from Resident Evil 5 and 6, where it's like shoot it in the arm, it unlocks the punch move, you punch it, and it's like a big long animation that has a huge hitbox that all
Right.
zombies nearby you get like knocked back, blah blah blah. Those days are over, baby. Most of the time in this game, if you're too close to a zombie, it's just awful, and it really punishes you for it. Again, like the original, but they kept the remake defensive items, so you do have a couple of last minute options, and I feel like it prevents some of the just getting trapped without any way to get out. So it's really like they've updated the gameplay, but they haven't taken away from the original feel of it, which is what I love a lot, you know, and there's a lot of that wasting bullets on a single zombie and feeling like it's just not going down sometimes, which contributes to this sense of dread where you're like, God, even this gun just is like nothing because this is like a sack of flesh that has one purpose coming at me. It's not like when you hit a human and it's like, oh, my hand hurts, so I'm going to sit down for a bit. This thing just doesn't care until like its bits are falling off. What did you feel about like the difficulty?
Well, it is scary that they made zombies like kind of scary, because zombies haven't been really scary to me since the original Resident Evil games, kind of for the same reason of that they're just basically like just unload into them until like they'll probably never reach you, because I know where they all are kind of loaded into the game or whatever, and they activate when I do certain things and blah blah blah. But in this game, they can like really get up on you and hoard you like real quick, and they just do not go down, and it's kind of actually terrifying in a way the zombies maybe never have been. Like Left 4 Dead kind of did some like freaky stuff with some zombie stuff, which is kind of similar, how they can just hoard you and run at you. But I don't know, there's just something about the zombies in this, the way they move and their physics and everything. They are just kind of like lumps of flesh coming at you, and they're just unsettling in like every way. I do feel though that there is a point where it is maybe a little bit too much. Like, it's weird because hardcore difficulty in this game, all of the enemies, especially the zombies, are kind of just like ammo dumps. Like if you want to kill them, you got to really just kind of dead space them and take their leg out just so they're not like in your way, and then run past them, which I guess makes sense because in all the other Resident Evil games, that's kind of like the more efficient way to take care of them anyways, is you just kill the ones that are directly in your path and you ignore everyone else. But then I was playing it on standard as well. And in standard, a single handshot or handgun bullet to the head will stagger them enough for you to run by. And they never felt like a threat in that.
Right.
Like, I just had to shoot them once and then run. Whereas in hardcore, I had to shoot them like 5 times in the leg and then hope they wouldn't lunge at me while I'm running by. There feels like there was maybe an unbalance somewhere. Like there was a difficulty missing in between them or something. And I don't know why that is to me.
It's kind of weirdly pointless, I found quite quickly most of the time, to shoot zombies in the head. Unless you're really prepared to just waste the bullets, or if you're kind of just going for a lucky crit attack that would take the head off, which occasionally does happen.
Or if you're Leon with the shotgun, he can actually deal with them. Claire's kind of screwed when it comes to zombie taking care of.
It was much hard. I found with Claire, it seems like her weapon kit is better at handling special enemies, whereas Leon is much better at just handling normal enemies like zombies. Claire, sometimes I was just like, this is miserable. I'd be like when I first started the game, I'm thinking, oh, shoot it in the head, because it's like every video game ever where you shoot things, you know. And then I very quickly learned, I was like, this is rubbish. Like this is not working out for me. And then I sort of learned. Watched someone else play, and they shot some zombie in the leg, and it fell over, and they ran around it. And I very quickly learned that that's kind of the hardcore strat,
Yeah.
is to constantly delimb zombies, which hasn't really been done very frequently. I can't recall another game with zombies in it where it's less about decapitation or burning, and it's more about just delimbing, and then it's less of a threat.
Yeah, I mean it's very Dead Space like in that way, but Dead Space went the step further of delimbing them actually did just kill them, which is kind of weird.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Which it makes it kind of almost like there isn't as many options with how you deal a zombie, because you're just like, oh, just delimb it. You have to delimb it, if you know what I mean. So I get that. I get that.
Yeah, zombies have always just kind of been an obstacle in Resident Evil games anyways. They've never been like particularly hard to deal with. They've just been annoying. In this game, they're kind of both. They're annoying and hard to deal with in a way that maybe is just more annoying sometimes, I will say. That's probably like my biggest criticism of it, is that the zombies are scary and they are kind of hard to deal with and have a lot of jump scares and like cool moments and stuff. But at the end of the day, they're kind of a pain in the ass too. There's one part specifically where you're running through a jail cell area as you're like leaving the precinct for the first time. And there's just like a hall with Mr. X, who we'll talk about in a second here. And then after you deal with him or get by him somehow, there's just like another hall with like 5 zombies. It's like, well, what the fuck, man? It's like, yeah, I hate this shit. So, yeah, I don't know. There's a few parts that just feel like that, where it just feels like they just threw a bunch of things that are too hard to deal with unless you have a very specific item. Like, unless you have like a flashbang or something, this hall is going to be your hell every time. And I don't know. That seems maybe okay for people who know what they're doing, but for a first-time playthrough, that's just annoying. Like, it just feels cheap.
So I've only played on hardcore difficulty, and I would say that most Resident Evil games, you begin to work out how many bullets a certain type of enemy will take from a certain gun. So you're like, okay, hunters are going to take 3 shotgun bullets in this difficulty usually, which does make, like, there is some RNG in Resident Evil games, to be fair. You can get lucky shots, etc. But I do think that one criticism I would have is that I basically felt like I was constantly trying to get a critical hit over and over.
Yeah.
I'm like, every time I fire a bullet into a zombie, like, its leg, and the leg doesn't fall off. I wasn't feeling like, oh, well, I'm still doing damage to the zombie. I was just thinking, oh, I didn't get its leg off, so that bullet has been wasted. So I've got like 15 chances to crit the leg off, as opposed to, oh, I'm just like dealing damage to the zombie, and maybe a good strat is to like make it less maneuverable, like, so the zombie can't come at me, but then finish it off. And instead it's just like, did I get the crit? No, shoot again. Did I get the crit? No, shoot again. Which, yeah, I get that. It's kind of not, it doesn't feel like you're fighting the zombie, it's just you're rolling the die a bit more. That maybe is a kind of hardcore complaint. And on standard, you're more just able to kill zombies off because they have less HP, I guess, so to speak, health points.
Yeah.
What about...
Another problem I have with standard, though, is that I want to be able to use ink ribbons, but you can't. That's like my main thing, is that I want this to feel like a Resident Evil game, but I don't necessarily want to roll the dice every time I need to kill a zombie. So there should be like an in-between where zombies can be staggered like they can in standard, because even in like standard difficulty, they're not easy to kill. They take like significantly less bullets if you do want to kill them. But like, they're still there. They still mess you up. They don't like almost one-shot you, I will say. So I guess there's that rainbow at the end of that tunnel, because in like hardcore, fucking everything basically kills you, like almost straight out.
So it sounds to me like you kind of want there to be like easy, normal, hard, and then classic or modern,
or like professional, because they usually do a professional mode.
Yeah, I get that. I think that would not be such a bad idea. The way that they went with the game is like fine with me, but I get what you mean about, as soon as I heard that you could save with ink ribbons in hardcore mode and you didn't get auto saves, I was like, right, that's it. That's
Yeah.
the experience I want, completely. Because we're old diehard Resident Evil fans, of course.
Yep. As far as I'm
Um,
concerned, you need an ink ribbon if you want to save. Also, I will say for hardcore mode, I never felt like I was running out of ink ribbons. They're fucking everywhere. So that
yeah.
I don't know. They could be a little more scarce maybe, but that's not really a huge criticism I have. That's just a personal thing that I was like, for hardcore mode, I sure can save a lot if I want to.
Like I nearly ran out my first time because I was
Really?
trying to save to be safe. I nearly ran out at one point, and then I found loads and it was fine. And I never really struggled past that. But I think it was just because the game was new and I was all excited and I didn't want like the hardcore mode kind of slapped me upside the head. I didn't really expect it to be that difficult. And I
Yeah.
died quite early, and I was like, "Whoa, okay, maybe I should try a little harder." But yeah, by the end of the game, you start just like saving for fun. Almost, you have like loads of ink ribbons, but that also is because we're probably looking properly for them.
That's probably true. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
because some people will miss things just straight up quite easily. They just won't thoroughly. I mean, the way that the map system works in this game, though, it's quite easy to know if you've not seen something in a room because it's still
yeah.
red. I don't think I ever had an experience where I accidentally didn't pick up the map, which sometimes has happened in old Resident Evil games where I'd explore an area and then come back to the beginning of it and realize it was just on a wall.
Man,
You
that
know?
map is good. That should just be in every video game. That map is real
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. Oh, it's such a good map. Also, the graphics screen where you could change the graphics options for the PC version of the game, like sublime. Some like
Oh,
being
yeah,
able
yeah.
to see what exactly it will change with like the way it renders things and how much load it will take on your computer. It's
Yeah.
brilliant. Like honestly,
Yeah, no, for sure. It's set a standard in like what all games should probably do on PC in a way that
Mhm.
might be a little surprising for Japanese developers because they don't usually do PC right. They just don't. And this is like
Yeah.
amazing. So,
Even Resident Evil 7 for the PC had like its a couple of issues, and a lot of
sure.
Japanese developers treat PC as like this kind of weird Western mess. That they're kind of increasingly they're dipping their toes into it. They're getting
They are,
there.
yeah.
But
Yeah,
there
for
were
sure.
some real dodgy ports coming out from major Japanese companies, like a couple of Final Fantasy games that technically are on Steam, but you're gonna have a bad time if you don't download some mods or fixes.
Hmm.
Um, but they're taking it more seriously now, and it definitely felt like I only had one crash, and this is quite an old PC. So as far as I'm concerned, technically it's done a really good job, and it runs fairly well. It's
Yeah.
not too taxing, and there's loads of options to bump it down if you have to. So
Yeah, that RE engine is really, really good for what they
mhm.
do. I was always surprised how well Resident Evil 7 ran. And I guess like it shouldn't have been a surprise, but I was surprised how well this ran as well for me. So yeah, good on
Yeah,
them.
yeah, they did a great job overall. Like it's not rushed.
It isn't.
It
No.
really, they released it when they wanted to, and they had like they weren't trying to like give people loads of information and keep people happy. They were like, we're just going to tell you about it when it's ready. It's not ready, and we'll wait. And I like how they seem to have developed the strategy of releasing it in January
Yeah.
because that's what they did with Resident Evil 7.
Yep.
But it's actually kind of nice because it's a quieter time of year for games to be released in. A lot of people, the traditional wisdom was like, hey, you got to release it for the Christmas rush,
Yep.
especially for like a AAA game. Oh, AAA games should all be released for the Christmas rush. But Capcom's like, no, you know what? We're going to release it when people are like, well, what do I play now? And I think it's a great time to drop it. It really did. Like, apart from Kingdom Hearts 3, which is like the complete antithesis almost of what Resident Evil 2 is. It's brightly colored, kind of child friendly phantasmagoria, and then there's Resident Evil 2 in the corner that's like dripping blood out of its mouth and it's very dark. Fine.
Even people that
I'm
like
not...
horror games are scared of Resident Evil 2.
yeah. I had quite a few people say to me that they couldn't play it, it was too scary for them, which is something of a triumph.
It's crazy, yeah. So okay, this is where we're going to talk about Mr. X because for him, I think he's really what does it for a lot of people. And I think my issue with it is I don't find him scary, but he's stressful. Borderline annoying in some parts where it's like, come on, man, I just need to get across the hall. Like, fucking leave.
Yeah.
But most of the time, like, when you hear him stomping around, it's like, I don't know, the sound they chose, like the sound effect for him moving around and just hearing him like open doors and like shut them behind him and stomp, 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 like up a floor or whatever. It's legit like stressful in a way that I don't like, but you're not supposed to, so it's fine. Like, you're not supposed to like this scary dude that you know nothing about just kind of walking around, especially how he kind of intros by moving a burning helicopter out of the way like it's nothing.
Yeah, he's freakishly tall, and I think he kind of looks a bit comical. He's very much like a kind of Rorschach kind of vibe.
Kinda, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's hard to take him seriously. Maybe he's a slight hangover from a game that was designed in the 90s, where that maybe had more of an impact, but now it's like, really? This is it? But he does, I think he makes a part of the game where you've kind of, the police station by the time Mr. X pops out.
Yeah.
You know it quite well, and you're basically moving some items around to sort of finish it up. And that part of the game could start to lose some of the steam in other Resident Evil titles where you're like, hey, I've already explored the rooms. I just need to put this thing over here for that puzzle and then go through here and then do that. So I think they've deliberately added Mr. X at that part of the game to try and keep the energy up.
Yeah.
And I think also, when I first encountered Mr. X, I had those great moments where you're like a child and you're hearing like people stomping around upstairs and you're a bit spooked out because, sound is a very primal thing. And that's fantastic. The sound direction for it and the way that you can hear him get further away and walk over wood, etc. I think I was beginning to get slightly annoyed by him. I was beginning to feel... I think one problem I have with him is that he's actually not that annoying if you know his limitations, but his limitations require like an innate sense of game design. Like, I knew he wouldn't be able to enter the STARS office or save rooms pretty quickly because I think like somebody who's played games a lot. But I think if you're newer to the franchise, you'd be like, oh, I can't move anywhere. Especially, I don't know if it's different on standards. I think in hardcore, his ability to sense where you are is like really developed.
It is, yeah. He's always on you. In fact, I would go so far to say on hardcore, he's programmed to always be within a certain like step radius from you because it didn't sound like he was ever gone. In standard, I outran him all the time. I barely saw him.
You barely saw. Yeah, I think that would check because I wasn't sure. I was asking people to confirm, but I felt like in hardcore, he was always like a room or two over, or only once did I see him in the main hallway when I was above in the main hallway, which I thought was great. I loved that I could look down and I could see him kind of, in my mind, it was like he looked up at me and he was like, I'm coming for you.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there like, oh no, here he comes. That was like my first time playing the game and I was around the clock tower, so there's not a lot of different areas you can move to. You're quite restricted at that point. But yeah, I think if you didn't have a strong enough idea of games design, you'd maybe find him kind of a bit unfair. I think a lot of people who are newer to the franchise might be like, I don't know how to get around him without him just finding me. Also, I'm kind of glad that the Mr. X section... Well, at first I thought it didn't go on too long. Because when you're playing as Claire, so I played as Claire A, Leon B, Mr. X is gone fairly quickly.
Yeah.
You get that cutscene and he gets like sliced in half or whatever, and you're like, oh, it's the end of Mr. X. There you go.
Yep.
So I thought it keeps it tense for like a short period of time, but it doesn't overstay its welcome. But I also conversely quite like how just when you're like, oh, I'm finishing up Leon's campaign, Mr. X is like, hello, back at it again. Here, it's me.
Back.
Do you think you were safe? And the fact that he's persistent, but like the actual moments where he's chasing you don't go on too long are the right choice. Because he would get tiring very quickly if they just kept it up for way too long.
Yeah, for sure. And also they have to do the whole like final fight with the super tyrant and blah blah blah. So
yeah,
it does feel like they really thought his role out more now because in the
He's kind of the MVP. He's like the social media star of Resident Evil 2.
Oh, for sure. I've seen so many memes using him, and I love every one of them.
Yeah.
So X Gonna Give It To You is just stuck in my head all the time now during every game I've been playing. So
we're all waiting for that mod that changes the music when he appears to that, and hopefully if they do the mod right, it'll like really kick in when he's in the same room as you and stuff. Like, I can't wait.
Yeah, because he has a theme that does kick in when he's spotted you slowly. So they could
the
just
tech
change
is there.
Yeah, it's there for sure.
Yeah, I can't wait. So for me, he wasn't too controversial. Some people don't like him, and I think, like I said, at first I was like, oh, I can't move at all. This is crazy. And then you realize what his limitations are. But
yeah,
overall, I think he keeps the pace up of the game. Some horror games have the issue where there's a kind of moment where, you're kind of just progressing. You're going to like the next big segment and things are a bit easier because you've cleared some rooms. And that's exactly what Mr. X counters, because right when that moment would kick in, they're like, here's the big mob that chases you, big monster. So I think it's great. I think it's a fantastic addition, and he's a memorable character for sure, much more than the original.
He still has that fucking jump scare too, which basically made me crawl out of my skin when it happened. God, I hate that shit. The same with
Through
Jack.
the wall.
Yeah, same with Jack in Resident Evil 7. Anytime something comes through a wall without like bars showing up on the screen and it just happens, I fucking hate it. That happened back in Resident Evil 2 in 98, and I like actually almost shit my pants. Like, it was so bad because every other jump scare in that game was scripted so that the cinematic bars would come up and it would be a cutscene, but not that one in the press office. Mr. X just busts through that wall instantly, and it's the worst. I hate it so much.
It doesn't feel like the game's really building up to it, and it's not kind of hinting that like, oh, wouldn't it be really crazy if something was about to come through the wall at you here? Because some horror games, they can't help but big up their own scares because they love them too much. But that one just is like, oh, by the way, boom, there you go.
I hate it.
I love it because I hate it.
Yeah, like now that I know it happens, it's awesome. But the first time, I wanted to kill myself. I was like, I can't handle this. It was so bad.
Yeah, fantastic. No, for sure. I think Mr. X is great. My only real criticism of the game that I felt like, one of the things I really like actually leading up to this criticism is that quite a lot, for Resident Evil 2 fans of the original, did you get to a point when you were playing kind of early on where you were like, oh, it's a shame that they took out that moment where you walk through the bus at the beginning, or the gun shop? Like, oh, there's no gun shop in this one. That's a shame, kind of thing.
They're totally, like, when I was playing it, I was like, wait, because I streamed it, there's actually my reaction of like, wait, I'm at the station? What happened to Raccoon City?
Yeah. You get like a weird sense of like, oh, did they just skip that?
Yeah, they cheaped out. Yeah.
And then kind of halfway through the game, you have to leave the police station, and that's when they put it in. And it's a total like, I thought that we didn't put it in the game, but we've just placed it somewhere different instead.
We made it make sense. Because why would you get through the sewers through the police station? That's stupid. You could just go this way.
It's a really, like, when you play the original, you're like, what? I'm just in the sewer now? Yeah, it's fantastic. I think they really played with the old fans' expectations with that one, and it makes it all the sweeter when you're like, oh, I'm going to the gun shop now. I'm walking through the bus now.
The bus.
Yeah, it's such a silly thing, but just that one bus is in my memory hardcore. My only real complaint about the atmosphere of the game is that when you're outside, they don't really have a lot of sounds of zombies groaning throughout the city.
Right.
And I think it makes the outdoor areas seem a bit kind of weirdly abandoned. But I always liked in Resident Evil 2, for me, it's like the sense of the outbreak is like kicking in, and people are mid-evacuation still. And they're like, the Resident Evil cast are maybe the slightly slower members, but it's still like all kicking off. Whereas in this one, because of the lack of ambient sounds, it feels like the city is kind of dead. It's a bit weirdly quiet, and I feel like that's a slight mismatch from the way it should be. Because in the original game, like from the very first scene where everything's on fire and there's zombies everywhere, the music kicks in, you're like, oh, it's all going off and everything's...
We're in the middle of it, yeah.
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 Whereas in this one, like, oh, it feels like everybody's already gone and it's kind of like a ghost town from the way that the ambience is. So maybe like a couple more ambient sounds outside to keep up like the idea of the city still being under siege is
Yeah.
like my only real departure that I feel from the original game that like makes it slightly less atmospheric, but it's like such a minor thing.
Yeah. No, I could definitely see that. I think this is a good time to segue into. We should talk about the Ada and Sherry sections because they are significantly different than before. In fact, Sherry adds a whole new like weird layer and whole new area that didn't exist before. In that,
Yeah.
I think I like the idea of, but I fucking hate that part. I don't like it at all.
You don't like Sherry's part?
No, so like as a quick overview, I guess Sherry gets kidnapped by a bad character to an orphanage where she's kind of held hostage, and you find out that the police chief Irons has been running this orphanage like with Umbrella and blah blah blah, using kids as test subjects because they made him super evil, which is a whole thing that I found funny in this, where he wasn't just like deranged, he was like just evil, and it's kind of funny. The thing I hate about the orphanage is I fucking hate forced stealth sections in horror games. And that's what this is. I hate it so much. That's really it. Like, I guess I'm not going to belabor the point. I don't like games like Outlast and stuff that do the thing where you have to hide from a thing, or like Amnesia. I was never a fan of either. There's a reason why I like Silent Hill games, Resident Evil games and stuff, because I like when a horror game gives you the ability to fight back, but the odds are so overwhelming. That's more horrific to me than just hiding from something that's always going to kill you. Like I don't like the helpless feeling. I like I could fight back, but it's probably not going to be in my best interest, or like give the character options or whatever. Cause I think inherently people will fight back. They won't all just cower and hide from stuff. So I don't like stealth sections in games. This is a stealth section. It's not very long, I will say, but it has this annoying part where you can just get insta spotted if you're not careful, because he does this weird deke out with his flashlight, and it has killed my run twice, and I hate it.
Yeah, it happened to me, and I hadn't saved right before.
Yep.
I had to go back quite a considerable length, and I got a bit annoyed. But weirdly enough, I really don't like stealth gameplay at all in any game. I find it very tedious.
Sure.
And I expected to hate that in Resident Evil 2. But weirdly enough, I would actually say I disliked Ada's section more than Sherry's section.
Her section is just boring, is the problem.
It's kind of weirdly bland. And it like, I feel like they thought that the hacking tool was more fun and interesting than it actually was.
Yeah, it's totally
not fun. It doesn't make that section interesting because you can hack. Because the hacking tool, for those of you who don't know, you basically like look through a wall and you'll see like a kind of blueprint looking thing through the wall, and if you hold down left click on it or action button on it, it hacks the thing through the wall so that you can open a door or whatever. But it's not very interesting compared. I think Sherry's segment is a little bit more thematically
I agree.
in place. You know, it builds up the idea that she's had like a sort of hard life, and I think it makes Claire's campaign a lot stronger than in the original.
Yeah, I think I agree.
Like in the original, Claire's campaign almost served more as just like she's the lore character. She's the one that fills in the lore, and Leon's is a bit more exciting. Whereas this time, I feel like there's more of an even balance, which is nice. So I like the Sherry section more than I thought, but it's good that it's short. If it went on too long,
Also, after the first time you go through it and you realize that Chief Irons will never see you until you grab the key, you just run through that first part and there's no tension at all.
If you learn how it actually works, you're like, hang on a minute, come on.
Yeah, I'm just gonna run through this now, I guess. I guess. Oh, so one of the things with the orphanage is you find out that Police Chief Irons is a psycho, and he obviously kidnapped a girl and like is embalming her because of taxidermy or whatever. So it seems like they went a different way with that rather than she seems like a runaway or whatever, and that's based on the DLC stuff that's coming up that I'll talk about in a second that I'm trying to segue into. So she seems like a runaway or whatever sort of thing. You meet you don't meet, but they kind of personify one of the Umbrella agents through tapes in this version as well. That's not Hunk. That like is an actual character or whatever that has a name. I can't remember what his name is. It's like Phillips or something generic sounding. And Kendo, they give kind of like a whole story to. And I kind of think that's neat that they're building out characters in this world, kind of like an Outbreak scenario or whatever in Resident Evil 2. And then they're going to release the free like little stories or whatever of them.
Yeah.
I think that's a neat little thing that they're doing. People have been complaining about it, but like it's free, so I don't really know how you can. I don't know.
It's a little sprinkling on the cake. It's a little aftercare for the title, which I think I don't feel like it was like a bad thing. I don't really see what else they could really add for DLC without going like kind of crazy with the amount of development it would require.
Right.
So I'm fleshing out the world is a nice thing to be able to put in. Yeah, like I don't really see what the problem would be.
Kendo's
overall
thing is like heartbreaking in a way I wasn't ready for. I couldn't.
Yes.
It was real bad.
Because in the original, I can still remember the voice lines in my head. Who are you? What are you doing here? And it's just so 1998. It's really ridiculous and silly, and he gets eaten very quickly. And you're like, hey, thanks for the gun, buddy. See you later. And he like talks to Claire slightly differently than Leon, blah, blah, blah. But in this one, it's like a moment of real humanity and loss.
It sucks.
Yeah,
hard.
it really like gut punches you when you're expecting something a little kind of silly and campy.
And more importantly, it builds into this narrative of like kind of opening Ada's heart, because it gives Leon like a platform to be like, he's the reason why I need to know this shit, why I'm gonna be with you to like take down this bullshit. Like it actually, oh my god, the way the story is like cohesive in this is fucking amazing, because the story for Resident Evil, as a huge fan of the series, is stupid. It always has been, and that's fine. But the way that this is like kind of molding these characters that we know together and kind of weaving their stories together is like surprisingly masterful and tactful in a way I wasn't expecting.
This game has like levels of subtlety that I did not expect for a Resident Evil at all. It kind of shocked me. I think that they've done a really fantastic job of showing the characters' personalities through the little conversations that they have in a way that they haven't really done always as well in Resident Evil games without relying on that kind of over-the-top caricature.
Sure.
Like, I got the sense that Claire was a kind of meat-headed Redfield, like her brother, very quickly from the way she talks. Like, there's one moment where things are very bad and she doesn't really seem to realize it because she's like, we're just gonna do it. I don't care. It's fine. It's like, Claire, hello, this is really bad. But because she's young and she's a Redfield, like her brother, you really quickly get the sense it's like, you're kind of a bit of a meathead, but it's very endearing.
Yeah.
And with Leon, you get the sense with the whole Ada plotline, it's like, you're very naive. You're a naive young man, and like a woman's paid attention to you, and you're a little, you can't help but
too altruistic
have like a
for sure.
judgment.
Like,
yeah, and then when he realizes the idea of like, hey, maybe this woman who's showing you attention has ulterior motives, he's like very hurt. You know, he can't quite believe it, but it's because he's just a little baby boy, and it's his first day on the force. He
is such a like bright-eyed, bushy-tailed rookie, but like at the same time, you can see that like he's professional, because the way he handles like in cutscenes and stuff, shooting stuff and running away from stuff, he's very skilled still. And that like plays into later when he becomes an actual like professional doing this sort of thing. But like, yeah, no, the way he just goes up to Ada and is just like, well, then shoot me or whatever. It's like, what are you doing, man? That's the worst.
You're being a teenager about it. Like, ugh.
And
like,
then she doesn't. It's like, what? It's so
Yeah, I
weird.
like it because that moment is so like he's a bit childish still. I also thought that the first cutscene you have with Marvin
Yeah.
surprisingly fills in a lot of the characters' personalities because Leon, the way he talks to Marvin, is very the Japanese concept of senpai kohai. It's very
Yeah.
much like he's speaking to like a superior, like an upperclassman or a superior, and he's like the junior, and he gets very like yes sir and blah blah blah. But when Claire talks to him, she's just like, oh, this is one hell of a situation here. What's all this about? Like she's a much more casual character about it because she's not a fellow police officer.
Yeah.
She's just like a lady who's got business to do. And I thought that was really interesting as well. Like Leon gets very serious about it because he's trying to, be an adult and be in this organization.
I mean, he's on the
And
job. Like
yeah,
whether
this is him
whether he likes it
doing
or
it.
not, I guess.
Welcome, Leon, as the sign says in that one room. And it's all like, hey, welcome to the new guy. And then I love when you find that note that's supposed
Yeah.
to be like, here's your first test. And then at the end, it's like scrawled in blood, or there's blood on the page. It's like, be thankful you're not here, rookie.
Yeah.
Somebody's written because it's like everything's been fucked up. And somebody's like, yeah, actually, be thankful you didn't make it for your welcome party because it wasn't great.
I really, really like Marvin in this, actually, where like it's obvious he made a mistake somewhere along the line, and he's like suffering for it the whole time you talked with him, and then you're just kind of gone for a while. Then when you come back, like if you don't know what's going to happen for whatever reason, like if this is your first video game ever or something, which I'm sure there's a section of people that it will be their first Resident Evil or whatever.
Some Leons out there where this is their first video game that they've shown up for.
They'll come
first
back
day on the video game force.
and they'll run to Marvin or whatever to see how he's doing, and then he's gonna fucking attack them. Like it's I don't know. I really like how they handle Marvin in this, and they didn't like go with this weird like transforming scene. They could have probably, but I'm kind of glad they didn't, because it didn't work out so well the first time, in my opinion.
If you watch Marvin transform and you don't kill him off, because you don't have to kill him off as a zombie, but if you see Marvin, the good man that he is, turn into a zombie and you don't do him the service of killing him off as a zombie, as far as I'm concerned, you have no soul. You're completely soulless. That man deserves a proper death. If anybody just leaves him as a zombie to run around that corridor for the rest of his days, like, come on, man. You're just the worst kind of people. But I like how I felt like that when I played it. I cared enough to be like, I'm putting you down because you've been a good person. Another NPC character I really like in this is Annette Birkin, actually.
They did some very subtle things with her where she's a different person depending on who you're playing when you talk with her for different reasons. And I really like that. Yeah,
she's much more fleshed out. She doesn't feel kind of as like ridiculously evil, but when at the last minute they're like, oh, I really did love my daughter. And you're kind of like, huh? You didn't really show that. Whereas, especially in Claire's campaign, they show her to be kind of a slightly conflicted woman that is capable as a scientist, but maybe not very capable as a person, as a human being.
And she has some demons that she's working through for sure.
Yeah. They really fleshed her out. Also, I really love how in Leon's campaign, Annette and Ada have like a weird rivalry.
Yeah.
They really dislike each other. Like that one last moment where Annette shoots Ada, even though she's supposed to be like dead off camera in the background, or she died like in the previous scene, quote unquote, and then she gets back up just to pop one last bullet in Ada to get rid of the virus. Yeah. But you could really sense that kind of like, I just really hate her. I'm just going to shoot her one last time. I thought that was a brilliant moment.
It was really cool, for sure. Yeah, they did a really good job with her. So one thing I thought was neat was, this is just kind of backtracking a little bit, talking about Birkin, because we haven't talked about him at all, the main antagonist, I guess. I really like that they kind of showcased just how powerful this fucking virus is in this game. So the first time you meet him, he's I think he's usually referred to as G1, where he's transforming or whatever. And he's still kind of human. And he's kind of saying like help me, or like, or whatever. And he has a human voice that's being distorted in pain while he's like transforming and fighting you. And there's like still some weird humanity there in the sound that isn't there later on. He's just like a monster later on. And I thought just from a like just I don't know, it just made sense, like the progression for that. But more importantly, I really, really like the scene of him killing the tyrant easily and just like showcasing that he is like the big bad in this. Like he is consistently getting stronger every time you meet him. And
It's kind of a shocking moment.
Yeah, it's a super shocking moment. He just rips that fucking dude's torso out. He's just like, say goodbye to your torso now. And that's not even like his full form yet.
And for you at that point in the game, Mr. X is an unbeatable constant presence that terrifies you. And then he comes along and Mr. X is like nothing to him. So you think, oh God, what is he going to be like? You know?
Yeah, for sure.
It's a clever moment. There's so many moments that are very clever in this where they've thought about it at length.
They really, really did, for sure. I really liked how they did the alligator scene, just to like kind of go a la carte with things I thought were cool.
Yeah, I wish it was a bit longer. Maybe it's over very quick.
It is over very quick. Yeah,
I remember reading
in
interviews.
The original too, though.
It is actually in the original. A lot of people think about it a lot more than it actually is in the game. Like it's over very quick in the original too. I remember reading interviews where they debated a little bit whether or not they should include it because they felt like it was a very 1998 thing to have in the game. This big stupid alligator fight where they're like, cool, let's just throw this thing in and you have to blow it up. Awesome. And then in 2019, with the tone of this game is a bit more somber. It's a bit more serious.
Yeah.
It's maybe has the chance to be a bit too silly. The actual experience of doing it is quite thrilling, though. I love the way it kind of bites at you towards the camera. That's very cool. But
I think people remember it more in the original because it didn't exactly show you how to take care of it. Like you just kind of had to know or read or have a friend tell you to go backtrack a whole way, like ways to this blinking light that you can interact with. That canister will come down. And then it takes one shot. So I think a lot of people, myself included, wasted a lot of ammo killing it with like gunfire the first time, making it feel like an epic fight. So that might be why people probably remember it so fondly, even though it's actually like a 2-second thing. And in this, at least it's like this full cinematic, like, I'm going to get you sort of thing, even though it's an insta-kill if it does get you, which is something I hate in all video games. I don't like insta-kills ever. But
and
whatever.
I had to use the loading screen to work out how to do that because the first time I did it, just like immediately ate me.
Yeah.
And then I was like, oh, I don't really understand why I got destroyed so quickly. And then I saw on the loading screen it says like, if you run down the middle, you're going to be alligator chow. So I couldn't read the rest of it because it loaded too quickly. But at that point, I was like, oh, it's got like a weird dodge left or right thing probably going on. And then you realize that the camera kind of pans in a certain direction so that you can see where it's going to bite more easily.
And it's a little wonky controlling too.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's weird.
For sure.
It's a weird thing.
But it's a fun segment, but yeah, it's maybe not the most like tight, perhaps.
Yeah.
Also, right afterwards, Ada's like, told you to watch out. It's like, you didn't tell me about the zombie alligator in the sewers, Ada.
And then it's never mentioned again. It's weird.
Yeah.
It's a weird part that just happens and then it never comes up.
Yeah, I love it though. It's like a sort of strange thing where they're like, let's just forget this happened. This is too much. We're done with this. Yeah.
What do you think of the main characters' reworks? Because I've been so mad. I can't remember what board I was reading, but I was reading just like some random thing. I don't think it was r/Resident Evil on Reddit. I think it was some other message board, probably like GameSpot or something. And there was a whole thread saying how they think Claire is ugly, and I disagree. I think she looks fucking amazing in this in a way that I really like, because they didn't go with this weird like model-esque thing that they usually do, or some like overly cute look that they usually do for like heroines. She looks like a normal person, and I really, really enjoy that. And I think Leon looks like, I don't know. Like, I think the way they got him to look like a young version of what a remake of like his older self would be, if that makes any sense. Because like 4, 5, and 6, or 4 and 6, like he had a certain look or whatever, but he didn't really age. This looks like a younger version of that look in a weird way that works out with like higher fidelity. I really like how they both look.
A fantastic job, I think, in this game of showing people's age without it being super like tacked on. Like Annette Birkin looks older than them, but she doesn't look like a wrinkled old hag to show that that's the case. You know, she just looks a bit older. I think that they both, more so with Claire, they have like a slight kind of goofiness about them. But if I'm being honest with you, I'm 28 years old now, so I'm getting to the age where I look at people who are like 20, 21, and I think, my God, you look young. Like you do, you just look very young. And I think with Leon, it's impressive how much he still looks this like the Resident Evil 6 or 4 Leon, but younger. Like you said, like it really, the way that the face is shaped makes him look younger. And I think Claire has like a slight goofiness to her that if I saw that in a real human being, I would think, wait until she's like 25, 26, and those features will like mature out and she'll look a bit more beautiful and maybe like a less like a sort of young girl still. She's got a kind of girlishness about her.
She has the full cheeks, the like young full like cheeks and whatever. Also, the Resident Evil engine has never been good at doing two things with people. It's never been good with facial hair, and it's never been good with teeth. Because I don't know what it does, but it does this weird shadowing where each tooth is very apparent. So when they do a toothy smile, it's disturbing. And Claire does a toothy smile a few times.
It's better in this one, but in Resident Evil 7, I remember there's a lot of characters that kind of look like this. They look like they would sound like this because their teeth are so prominent. They've got crazy, like overly modeled teeth almost. It's a bit better in this one, but it's the same engine. Right.
Yeah, no, totally. So that's also just a problem with the engine. So depending on like what the cutscene is or the angle, Claire and Leon could look really silly or like totally fine, depending. I think they mostly looked fine.
Yeah, I think they look young and it's great. And maybe they're not both completely model, like beautiful, but you know, we've got so much of that in games as is. Maybe they're just a bit young. They're like two goofy young people who are going to blossom into more handsome, more beautiful people in a couple of years.
Handsome zombies.
Let them be goofy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let them be a little goofy for a while. It's fine.
Yeah, for sure. So, yeah, do you have any closing things you want to talk about before we discuss where from here, I guess?
Thank God it's good. That's what I'm going to say. Thank God this was good. Yeah. It's amazing how much. So when you look at the actual financial reports for like just raw sales, Resident Evil 5 and 6 are some of the best-selling games Capcom has ever had.
Yeah,
ever. Monster Hunter World is their current number 1. Street Fighter 2 is 2. I think it's like Resident Evil 6 and 5 or 3 and 4 or something bonkers like that. They're in the top 5. It would have been so easy for them to just get really complacent and be like, it sells the best. We're going to just keep doing that. It makes the investors happy. And I have to give Capcom real kudos. I think whoever's working on the Resident Evil team in Japan cares about Resident Evil. And I know it doesn't seem like that sometimes with their missteps in the past, but I think that this is a labor of love and it shows. So hats off to them.
It's kind of too bad that for the last 3 years in a row, Capcom's released my game of the year in the first month of the year. There's nothing else to look forward to.
Yeah.
That's the cynical part of me. Anyways, I suppose.
Yeah.
So from here, people are saying, when's Resident Evil 3 coming? Obviously, remake. I don't know how they do a Resident Evil 3 in this like world that isn't just basically like Resident Evil 2 again, but like with Jill and like Nemesis and like maybe more zombies or something because it's more overrun. But like, I don't know, man. I like Resident Evil 3. I don't really know how they do it unless they just do something completely different, which I guess I would be up for if they just do something completely new.
Yeah, I think the conclusion I came to is that I would maybe prefer for them to do Resident Evil 8, as I would guess we
Yeah,
would call it, and then think about doing a remake of 3 if there was enough fan demand. Because I think if they remake 3 now, it's basically going to be a bit like this game, but with a different setting, which isn't the worst thing in the world. And maybe if they did do that, I mean, if they did that, I wouldn't be upset. Because I think 3 is still pretty good, although I know that originally some people had some issues with it. I think personally it was just like the formula was beginning to wear off in terms of like that kind of freshness
sure.
back in the day when they first released Resident Evil 3. Um, yeah, it would basically be very similar to this game, I'm sure, if they tried to remake it. Not a problem, but I think maybe if they kind of do Resident Evil 8 first, by the time they maybe get round to it, they could have some fresher ideas to make it feel like not just remake kind of thing.
Yeah.
I actually saw an article at one point where one of the developers said that a remake of Remake wouldn't actually be such a crazy idea to him, believe it or not. So a remake of Resident Evil 1 remake.
I could see that. Yeah, because like even playing the remake recently, it does have weirdness to it still
Yes.
in a way that old games do. Like everything, especially after playing this, because this game is very natural in the way the characters develop, in the way their lines are delivered, the voice acting, and like everything feels very natural. And Resident Evil Remake still feels like a weird video game, even though it's like a beautiful version of the first game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I could see them doing that for sure. That doesn't seem that crazy to me.
I mean, I would love that
Me too.
for sure, but they have some options at the moment. I'm sure that internally what they would like to maybe consider doing for Resident Evil 8, they have an idea for it. If not, have already started to kind of work on it. I definitely think that the fan demand for Resident Evil 3 remade will probably be there. So far, this game has sold over 3 million copies, I believe.
Oh, really?
In
I have no idea,
like,
actually.
I think I just saw that before we started talking, which is, it's a great sale.
3 million copies in its
Remakes,
first week.
yeah, that's fantastic. And remakes sometimes don't do as well as you would think. Sometimes the fan hype outpaces, like the fan hype on Twitter and stuff outpaces the actual sales when you
Yeah.
get down to it. The original remake being an amazing example of that, where it actually sold really poorly. It's probably because it was on the GameCube more than anything.
Yeah. I bought a GameCube for the remake. So,
What a
yeah.
great game to buy a GameCube for, though. Like, totally amazing game.
Yeah, I had to. Like when they announced that stupid remake, it was when I started getting more and more invested in the internet stuff, and I was part of a bunch of Resident Evil forums because Reddit wasn't a thing yet. And like people were like, they had scans from Japanese gaming magazines that they would translate, and like we would all just speculate over what would be happening or whatever. It was like a year-long thing before the game even came out. Like there was no way I wasn't just gonna buy a console to play that thing after the hype that led up to it.
Yeah. Okay, so I've got some quick numbers here from GameSpot.
Okay.
The original Resident Evil 2 from 1998
Yeah.
managed to reach, according to GameSpot, 4.96 million sales during its lifetime.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
They've already shipped, keyword, they're shipped 3 million copies of Resident Evil 2 Remake in its first week, which is, I honestly think that's bonkers. I think that's great.
That is crazy. Yeah, for sure.
I think they're doing amazing. Resident Evil 7, I think, was like a sleeper hit because people were losing some faith in the franchise. And then they were like, oh, this kind of almost doesn't feel like a Resident Evil game and is good. It managed to reach 6 million copies shipped.
I think it reached a whole different type of player because it was first person.
Yeah, and it felt like an indie horror game more that is more popular on, like, for instance, in the YouTube kind of circle and things like that. It definitely is reaching like a different audience. I agree.
7 has always been an easy thing to watch, for sure.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm. That first hour in particular, ooh, it's like an
Yeah.
adrenaline rush.
That game gets kind of bad, but for a while, it's very, very good.
Yeah, the last third of it, you're like, oh, this
The
isn't
boat. I hate the boat. Oh,
the boat. It's completely. Once you get to the boat, it really sinks.
it's downhill.
In quality.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think this game, there was a lot of hype for it, and it probably will sell more than Resident Evil 7. I think it's better than Resident Evil 7, and I hope it does, frankly.
Yeah.
I would say, for me, it's remake for 1, then Resident Evil 4, and then this, in terms of like my rankings
Okay, cool.
overall.
For me,
How
it's
about you?
remake and then this. So
I'm close to putting this above 4. I'm very close.
yeah, I don't like 4 at all. So it's an easy
Not
choice
at
for me.
all, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, I've grown to appreciate it, but I still don't like playing it. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what it is about it. I replayed it recently and I just don't like. I guess with 4, it's the fact that it deals a lot with going into a room and then having to kill a bunch of dudes to progress, or at least so they're not in your way. And I just didn't like how that felt.
Yeah, they're very much more kind of, the zombies become more fodder in that.
Yeah.
It's the beginning of the action game vibe, but I think that Resident Evil 4 is still like sufficiently horror enough.
It was
to-
super important
like-
and influential, but
Mhm.
yeah.
No, like you're like me though, where you prefer the more original style, and this is much more original style than
Yeah.
actiony. You know, it's mostly it's like mostly the melee combat. Once you take that away and you stop people like uppercutting zombies and doing like dive bombs and stuff, it so much when you enter that kind of like weird territory. But yeah, overall, super happy. This has been fantastic as a game, and I've really enjoyed playing it.
Yeah, I definitely agree. So, yeah, big thumbs up from both of us here. If for some reason somebody would be listening to this and haven't picked it up, I think this is a great place for even people that aren't into the series to start, because you don't really need the background. It's its own thing, really, for sure. And I highly recommend anybody checking it out, especially people that are super into the game. And yeah, I think we can end it there. So thank you for talking with me. I had to talk to somebody about this game, and nobody I'm really that close with or like talk to regularly are into survival horror games, or Resident Evil games enough, and it's kind of sad.
Oh, that's just not acceptable, frankly.
Yeah,
Wow.
I need to make
tough
more
one.
friends.
Well, no, thank you for having me talk to you today. I had a really nice time. I kind of just streamed the last part of me playing Leon B today. Had a couple of hours to think about it, and talking about it to you has like helped solidify my thoughts. So it's been fun, and hearing what you think too has been a great time. Thanks.